Hey, it's Zane here. Happy Friday to you. Hope you've had a great week and are doing well wherever you may be. Look, I wanted to just share some thoughts today. I've just been listening to a podcast from London Real. Brian Rose, you may have heard of London Real before. Big podcast on YouTube. And he's just interviewing Michael Saylor in a two-part series, and it's about a 2 hour stint, so it's taken me a little while to get through it, but I've spent quite a bit of time over the last 2 years listening to Michael Saylor, and he's just a phenomenal voice for financial sovereignty, understanding the state of the global financial system, and why it's so important that we start to think of ways to protect and preserve our wealth because of what we've seen over the last 2 years. Now, obviously, a little bit of a different video today, and obviously it's not for everybody, but for anybody who's very conscious of where we've been the last couple of years and wanting to think of ways to, really move toward the future, protecting their wealth, preserving the dollars in their pocket, and basically being their own bank and being in control of their own financial sovereignty, then I think this message today is going to resonate with you. But, one of the things that Michael Saylor often says that really hit home for me, he's got a statement, words to the effect of, the road to serfdom, which is basically living like a peasant, is defined as working exponentially harder for a currency that is growing exponentially weaker. Now, if you just think about that for a moment, basically what that means, if you track back through history and you look at how our grandparents used to function on one income, and they could buy their own home and own it outright, buy their own car and pay cash for it and have a good life, and then even, the early part of it, the era of our parents, and then you really track since then, and how society has changed, where it's no longer enough for a family to function with just one income, have a couple of kids, buy their own home, own their own home. Everything now is based on debt, and it's all to do with the central banking system, which has been allowed to basically run rampant since 1971, since we've had floating currencies and Richard Nixon took the United States off the gold standard. And the reason why the United States was taken off the gold standard was because they broke a promise from Bretton Woods after World War II, where the US was basically going to be the custodian of all of the world's gold, and in return for countries depositing gold at Fort Knox in the United States, the US was going to give IOUs to those countries, and those countries at any time would be able to redeem that paper currency for their gold, because it didn't make sense to just ship gold all around the world for trade. So, once the US decided that the gold standard was no longer going to apply, we then had what was known as a floating currency, and Australia's the same. We've basically fallen into line with the same system. But the problem with that is that as time has gone on, more and more debt has basically come into the system. And so the last 2 years, what we've seen is an unprecedented real estate boom. We've seen the wealth gap grow wider and wider. Most people, when they think about what happened with the pandemic and, the way all of a sudden when businesses were shut down, people couldn't go to work, people were locked down at home, all of these erroneous mandates and things that were rolled out that were backed by absolutely no science whatsoever. There was no open debate where, experts could come and discuss whether or not any of this made sense. All of that was shut down. But what was happening was these central banks and these governments were teaming up and just injecting trillions of dollars into the economy. And most people, the average person in the street, probably thinks, well, what else were they going to do? Businesses were shut down, we couldn't operate, we couldn't survive, and so we needed to rely on these governments to basically prop us up. They shut us down, so of course, why wouldn't they inject some money into the system so that we could survive? Now, all of that, makes logical sense to a point. But then if you think about it a little bit deeper, you begin to realize that those trillions of dollars had to come from somewhere. And basically, when you have a central bank that can create currency out of absolute thin air, what happens is that's backed by nothing. What happens is the value of the dollars in your pocket becomes worth less. All right. So every time a central bank injects currency into the system, the value of the dollars in the pockets of those who already have those dollars and have worked for those dollars now becomes less and less. And so what we had was a system that was injected with trillions of dollars with liquidity, and that liquidity was looking for a place to find home. And where it typically found home was in the stock market and, of course, in the real estate market. So it wasn't that we had a housing boom based on a strong economy, businesses booming, strong fundamentals. It was nothing to do with that. It was purely to do with the value of the currency being decimated, being devalued, and then, of course, it requiring more and more and more dollars to buy those same assets. So when we look at the fact that, house prices in some areas went up 40%, 50%, even 70% in certain areas around where we live, that was unprecedented, but it was also on the back of an unprecedented amount of money printing. And so the more you begin to understand this, the more you begin to realize, well, hey, we've got a problem here. We have a problem here because if we're going to go to work for dollars and we're going to work our bums off to create a living and a life for ourselves and to try and hopefully create some financial freedom, but we're operating in a central bank system, an illusionary system that's backed by nothing, where they can just inject untold amounts of currency at any given time. A few people sitting in a room can make that decision and the people have no say in it. Then we have to realize that that's a problem. That's not a good system to be a part of. Now, thankfully, there are solutions. Thankfully, we have the opportunity to become our own central bank. Okay, and we can talk about what those opportunities look like, and I'm certainly making, and the last 2 years have made quite significant inroads into moving my life and my family's life outside the system, because I truly believe when you study the history of banking and you study where we are globally, financially, and what the true agenda is, there is only one solution, and that is to get as much of what you have outside the system as you possibly can. And so we live in fascinating times, and really my point today is just to realize that if you're not already getting educated about the state of the global financial system and what's driving it, and why it is that countries like Argentina, Turkey, Lebanon, the value of their currencies are absolutely imploding, losing value, 70%, 80%, 90% of their value. You have to realize that very, very soon, the more developed countries, the same thing's going to happen. And we've just seen in the last week the announcements with what's happening with the British pound. And there was a time when the British pound was the benchmark currency of the world, but not anymore. It's lost so much of its value. For the first time in decades, it is now on parity with the US dollar. Well, that was never ever the case. And so there's all these red flags now that we need to be dialed into and we need to be conscious of if we care about our financial freedom and our personal wealth creation and financial sovereignty moving forward. And I'm not sure about you, but that's an important thing to me. We can talk about health and wellness and all kinds of things all day long, having a passion, having great relationships and all of those things, but we live in a time where we've got to be really, really conscious of where we sit financially and make sure that we're getting our house in order as well. So look, maybe in another video I'll give you some thoughts around what I'm doing, but really today I just wanted to highlight the point that if you're not studying the financial system, and not so much the financial system, but just a rational understanding of what's going on in the world and where these institutions are trying to take us, these elites that are operating in this little echo chamber and trying to push the world down this road, where we have the opportunity to step outside that system so that we're not swept up in it, then now's the time for us to start educating ourselves in it. All right, so get onto YouTube, look up Michael Saylor. That would be a great starting point, and just start getting educated on what's going on. Tom Bilyeu interviews some phenomenal guests on his channel. London Real Brian Rhodes, he always interviews awesome guests in this space as well, studying the financial system. Get on to Stansbury Research, Danielle Camboni. She is a phenomenal host as well. Stansbury Research, you'll get 15-minute clips pretty much daily from her interviewing guests who are all talking about the state of the financial system and what it means for us as individuals and what we can do to protect ourselves. So that's my message today. Get educated, get financially smart, because we've got some rough times ahead, and now's the time for us to really get on top of things and to get our house in order. I know a little bit long today, but I hope you got something from that. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. I'll probably drop a video over the weekend at some point. But yeah, have a great one. Thanks for watching. This is Zane signing out. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.